Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Sigmund.
And I'm Mike Passinio.
This is the Weekly Movie Throwdown, a discussion show where each week we dig into a film that fits our overall monthly theme. This week, we are wrapping up 21st century Westerns with probably the best one of all of them, I think. We're going to talk about 2007's No Country for Old Men, and we have a guest as well, and we're going to talk to him in a minute. Before we do, we'll talk about some news. Mike, what do you have for us?
Yeah, there were a few small things that came up this week, but just one thing I wanted to talk about real quick before we get into it. I was watching Showtime randomly at my father's house because I don't have cable, and I saw an advertisement for a movie called The Comeback Trail, which I thought, oh, that's interesting. Comeback Trail stars De Niro, Zach Braff, Tommy Lee Jones, who's in No Country for Old Men. Well, this seems like an interesting movie. Didn't know it existed. And it said that it had just come out on Paramount Plus. So I go to Paramount Plus, it's there. But it's a movie I've never heard of, didn't know existed. Would never have heard of it if I wasn't randomly watching Showtime in the afternoon with my father, who watches afternoon TV. So I thought, well, that's pretty strange. And then I read an article this week with a similar thing about someone talking about how they had no idea a new Wes Anderson movie was coming out in like 2 weeks. This just seemed to kind of materialize out of nowhere. And I had a similar feeling, actually. I had no idea it was coming out June 6th. And I think the larger point is that I just think that we are really having problems trying to figure out where things are and how to find them. And I think that we're reaching like critical mass here, because I think we talked a week ago where I had gone to the CW app randomly to look for a show that I was watching with my son and discovered there were like 20 shows on the CW app that I never heard of in my life that were existing in the moment. And I don't know what the larger thing is here, but this feeling that we're reaching critical mass of entertainment that possibly no one even knows is happening seems worrisome to me.
Well, I think it's, everything is spread out, so it's hard to find everything where it is. I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can produce things on, and that's kind of it. But looking at this De Niro movie, it's De Niro, Tommy Lee Jones, and Morgan Freeman, and I would be shocked if this were not like a straight-to-video movie.
Look, there's almost a 90% chance it's not good. But you're talking about three major movie stars in a movie that was released into the ether. And I just find that shocking nowadays that you think there'd be at least a little bit of promotional push behind it. But you're right, everything is just kind of spread out, but I don't know how anybody gets their projects seen in a way they need to be seen. If a movie with De Niro and Morgan Freeman gets released without a peep, I just find that shocking.
Well, if it's straight to video, I think, or streaming as it is now, that's probably a good chance that it's like the things Bruce Willis was doing for a while, or Liam Neeson. Like those things just kind of show up. The Marksman, this Liam Neeson film that I've never seen anything about, but there it is. And there's more and more of that these days. But as to the Wes Anderson film, I've seen quite a bit of promotion for that, but it's really been a push in the last couple of weeks. It's at Cannes this week, so I think that's probably going to be the big launch for it. But Wes Anderson doesn't really get a lot of marketing anyway for his things. Like the diehard fans just kind of know it's there and they seek it out.
Yeah, I consider myself a pretty big fan, and I really only found out about it a couple of weeks ago. So yeah. So maybe this is just a me thing, but I do find that I'm becoming concerned that, people like us who tend to try to find new things and are seeking things out are having trouble finding them. I think that's, a little bit worrisome, but
it is. And I don't know if it's going to get better or worse, but with so many outlets out there, places that things land, are you going to find them?
God forbid it goes behind the dreaded MGM Plus firewall, which this movie is, by the way. No Country for Old Men, it's an MGM Plus, which means no one's going to watch it. Because no one that I know has MGM Plus. But
wow. I did not know that. I don't even... Do you get that on Amazon? Is that like one of those channels?
So. Amazon owns it, but it's a separate thing. So even if you have Amazon Prime, you have to subscribe to it, which means no one is doing it. Godfather of Harlem is a show that no one watches because it's stuck behind the MGM Plus firewall. But we won't get into that.
That is shocking. Yeah. Did you have another story you wanted to bring up?
No, I just wanted to complain about that, and I'm good. We should move on.
All right. Because I am the harbinger of death on this show, the Anton Chigurh of Hollywood, I'm going to mention that George Wendt passed this week. famed for, his role of Norm on Cheers, but had a pretty fun career in film prior to that. I'm thinking specifically of House from 1985, which was just like a wonderful film, and Fletch too.
And he was in Gung Ho, which was that
Yeah.
movie about Japanese cars that was made with Michael Keaton, which is a movie I kind of loved. So yeah, he had a decent run in that mid '80s, making some okay movies.
Yeah, I don't think Gung Ho would ever get made today.
Oh,
That
it would
was
not. But
very, very much not what we're making these days. But yeah, and he kind of became a guest star on a lot of shows after Cheers. That sort of became where he lived as an actor later on. But he was in a film in 2021 called Christmas with the Campbells, which is maybe Netflix or Hulu. Like these streamers are really trying to take the Hallmark movie and make them edgy. And so there are a ton of like adult Christmas movies. And this is one that he was in with Justin Long and Brittany Snow. That's basically the same as Hallmark movie, but there's swearing in it and maybe like a sex scene. But Netflix in particular is really trying to cash in on this genre. And he happened to be in it, and he played like a naughty dad. So it's maybe one of the last ways we remember George
speaking of
Wendt.
naughty dads, he also played the dad who told Macaulay Culkin to turn his music down in the Michael Jackson black and white video. If you remember that.
That's right.
I just
That's another
remembered that.
highlight. Yeah.
I have no idea why that just popped in my head, but yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, rest in peace, George Wendt. No more news this week. I want to get going because I'm really excited. We have a guest with us. Very happy to welcome to the show David Tromblay. Let me tell you a little bit about David. David Tromblay served in both the United States Army and Navy before he earned an MFA in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His memoir, As You Were, was named one of the best nonfiction books of 2021 by Kirkus Reviews. After retiring from the military, he worked as a medical courier, which inspired the novel The Essentials. But working as a substitute teacher during the pandemic caused him to divorce the idea of becoming an educator. He now lives in rural eastern Oklahoma with giant dogs and tiny gulls in the midst of his ever-growing gardens and permaculture food forest. Very excited to hear about that. He has an upcoming novel called Coydog, which has been described as No Country for Old Men meets Fargo. That's his fourth book, and that's why he's here. Seems very fitting. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the cover, of course. You are my cover designer.
That's right. Yeah, it felt very, as I watched No Country for Old Men, I watched it on the Criterion Blu-ray or 4K edition, overseen by Roger Deakins. It is like an incredible transfer. But there is a scene that's in the film, but it's also in the opening credits that almost looks identical to your cover. And my heart stopped a little bit because I swear to you, I did not copy it from this film. It came organically, but there it is.
It happens. Things live in the ether. There's a vibe, and if it matches, it matches.
And I haven't read the book yet, but I do have a galley that your publisher gave me recently, so I'm very much excited to dig into it. But it feels like akin to No Country for Old Men, which is, I guess, why you brought the movie to us. So, yeah, I mean, you want to tell us a little bit about Coydog?
Coydog was very much a love letter to Jim Thompson. And when I was going through college and getting my undergrad in English and then my master's, I'm reading all this canonized, celebrated writing, but between that, I'm reading the old pulp novels and the westerns that my grandpa and my stepdad were reading when I was growing up. So eventually, I just kind of divorced myself from academia and started writing when I was actually working on my PhD. Moved to Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is a small town with a huge college, 25,000 people, but it was a ghost town in the summer. So there was just all these sore thumbs walking around. You would see them, and I had my daughter with me, and we would, sit around and make up stories like, what, this guy. Or there's a guy that pushes a wheelchair around, and that's what he makes his beer runs in. So on and so forth. And then so much of the just the Oklahoma man, but basically, that's superimposed over the Florida man, but we don't have the sunshine law. It was crazy. Like I read in the news while I was just sitting there with my daughter. They had a drug sting at a strip club that was hosting dwarf wrestling. It's like, I love this place.
Wow.
This is a Coen, Oklahoma could be produced by the Coen brothers. So I started seeing things like that, and like this is very much like the Jim Thompson over the top crime caper. Everyday people going through desperate times is very much what the story's about. And I'm a veteran, so it took me a while to write about veterans because I don't want to seem representative. So I just took an amalgamation of people I know, and myself included, and sent them on a path. And so many crime books out there have their guys are former Army Rangers or Special Forces or Navy SEALs. Moses Kincaid is just an MP. He got out of the military. Now he needs to feed himself. So the easiest thing for him to do is start working for a bail bondsman, tracking down people. Eventually, he takes off after a guy who accidentally or purposely mowed down 2 bikers. And he ran to his hometown in rural eastern Oklahoma in a made-up, fictionalized county, which is Anadarko County. And that right there is just a nod to Jim Thompson, where he was born in Anadarko, Oklahoma. But they make no mention of him. When everything shut down during the pandemic, like the entire state was a ghost town. So I just drove all over. And I went to go see places and to kind of explore. And I went to what I thought would be Jim Thompson's hometown and maybe a little museum. But he was actually born at home, which was above the county jail in 1905. So there's no marker there. There's no way to visit there that you want to. But what I did to kind of transpose everything, as you read, the Anadarko County sheriffs, they're all the Lincoln County regulators. The females, the woman sheriff, she's Bonnie McCarthy, which is 2 of Billy the Kid's names. All of her deputies are members of the Lincoln County regulators. There's so much rumor of him escaping to either Texas or Oklahoma. Of course, Old Henry, which was an amazing Western film with Tim Blake Nelson, who played, as the movie reveals itself to be Billy the Kid in hiding as an old man. And then, of course, in Young Guns 2 and Young Guns, those were huge influences on me when I was 12, 13 years old when those were coming out. So I can quote those. I could probably do the dialogue. So it's really a love for all that kind of stuff. And I think ultimately the vibe, since we're diving into movies, the vibe of this book, because people have said that Moses has an Anton Sugar kind of violent coldness to him, which I understand. But this is very much in the same kind of vein as Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
Oh, cool.
And that's like one of the best contemporary Westerns that came out in the 90s, which was last century, of course.
But it's close enough.
Close enough, yes. So, that's really it. I dove into some of the Oklahoma lore. Jake McNeese is a very, very famous man, but most people don't realize it. He was the leader of the Filthy 13 during World War II, which was a small band of demolition saboteurs. They just blew shit up. Portrayed in The Dirty Dozen and then in Glorious Bastards by Brad Pitt, who was an Okie himself. So I came with the idea of those guys instead of the Hells Angels, who were just disenfranchised airplane mechanics. But if you took these demolition saboteurs who were scalping people wearing war paint, mohawks, and going into battle like that, what if they started a biker gang in 1944?
Wow.
And what would that look like in 1995? Because the Hells Angels really didn't get violent until 1970.
Right.
So that exacerbated kind of looking through the lens of Jim Thompson. And of course, all of his books are labeled Greek tragedies, which you could also put that label on No Country.
Right. Wow. First off, Oklahoma sounds like the most cinematic place I've ever heard of because...
Well, it is because I describe it in the acknowledgments, but in the southeast, you've got gators and swamps. And then
Yeah.
you've got the foothills of the Ozarks. And then you've got the prairie grasslands with the buffalo and the bison.
Right.
And then you get on the other side of I-35 and you're in the desert. And we have salt plains, we have sand dunes, state parks, everything.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah. I remember I drove across the country and I camped my way to California, and I stopped in Oklahoma at this lake that was clay, and it was like this colorful clay. I think it was pretty close to the eastern side, but it was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I'm just sleeping on this clay bed in the middle of nowhere.
I don't know if you got that, but yeah, that clay. I had a couple of things that I had mocked up, but the clay, the dust, just basically that layer of dust that settled after the Dust Bowl is, that's that grit that's still affecting. I mean, it's literally the Grapes of Wrath territory, what we're talking about.
Well, I was going to ask you why you brought No Country for Old Men to the show, but I mean, it seems pretty evident that this is very much in the DNA.
That may be a sin to say, but McCormick's books are too dense. The descriptions are so rich, I forget what the story is.
Yeah.
So this was just a perfect adaptation in a year of amazing adaptations. And for me, books don't get to control your emotions, but film does with sound and music. And this lacks that completely, except for the scene where he wakes up to a mariachi band.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point that the books are dense, especially McCarthy, and this particular one is told a lot through the thoughts of the main character, the sheriff. And I really did want to talk about, when we get to that, whether or not, removing all of that and making this movie as tight and almost dialogue free as you can make a film, if it's almost better than the book in some ways, but because of that, because it's so sparse.
Rather than having ominous music or playing on your closed captions, you're listening to the crunching of the tires as the time is passing. And you've got Anton, the shark in the water. It's just it's so much. There's so much that they did with the pacing of this without making you feel a certain kind of way or forcing an emotion on you.
Just to back up a little bit, this is part of our 21st Century Westerns series, and it shares so much with a lot of the other films we've talked about this month, Mike. It has, a lot of the hallmarks of the old Western, like the very clear-cut good versus evil. But then and that's in the sheriff and Anton, but then it throws in the middle something I think is like a very 21st century Western thing, which is sort of the morally ambiguous interior delving character who maybe isn't apparent in something like the original 310 to Yuma that we watched. But here, that's very much a part of like the things we see post 2000 when it comes to Westerns, and especially the things we will talk about from this year, because it was such a good year for these Westerns that it's pretty amazing, actually.
Very basic plot, and with the Western and what they've done with the starkness of it is all the characters battling the environment. That's why it's a Western, and that's but you've got the Anton is the approaching west. The sheriff and Llewellyn are basically bookending that cowboy generation that is fighting this new and encroaching. But what they do is there's essentially, and what I like to do in my stories is going into my stories, and any good story, you should know that there are no good people. And by the end of the story, you should know there are no bad people. There's just people struggling against circumstance, and they've been created. Anton, I will argue, is just weaponized mental illness.
I was looking into this. I don't know if you guys saw this. Speaking of that there was an article published in the Journal of Forensic Scientists in 2013 where they did a review of all of like movie villains of the past 95 years in movies, excluding like Darth Vader, excluding, like, it had to be real people, excluding science fiction villains. And they found that this is the greatest depiction of a psychopath of any movie in movie history.
Really?
Yeah, according to people who do this for a living, like psychiatrists,
Yeah.
and so I think that's fascinating. I think you're right in some ways, because I think they would consider it a mental illness as well. So yeah, it's just he is the purest form of a remorseless psychopath that has existed on film. But getting back to the idea of this is a Western, because I'm glad that we're talking about this first, because that's really what I wanted to talk about. I do think there are lots of Western elements in it. The Coen brothers themselves don't really consider this a Western,
No.
which I think is interesting. But I personally think what makes it better than what a normal Western is, because we did 3:10 to Yuma and talked about the psychological Western that was done in the 50s. But what this brings into it is, I think this is really like a noir movie wrapped up in a Western. It's got so many elements of film noir in it. I mean, and that's what Coen brothers do really well. They're very good
Exactly.
at making noir movies. So you take the West, you put a noir movie into it, and you get this really singular type of vision of what a movie looks like. It's got all of the eeriness and the dread that hangs over the entire movie, which is so film noir, but in a Western setting, which I think works much better than I even expected it would.
What they do so well in the noir is they only show you enough of the character for you to understand what's happening. And dropping the crime in the desert is it's creating crime in itself, but I think it's very much just the place happens to be a dying place, which
Yeah.
is what we get to see. Now there is no more way for cowboys to earn money, and they're essentially robbing the people that are robbing the land.
Right.
Yeah, and then because it's set in 1980, you also get the element of having the Vietnam vet coming back, which is very much a thing at that period of time too, where you had vets coming back to either a land that didn't accept them or a land where there was nothing for them because things were bad economically.
My next book, Paleface, is set in 1977, and essentially every able-bodied man of that time frame was a Vietnam vet.
It's true. And I think you also have kind of like modernity encroaching on the people from that time. Like that's the whole thing with the sheriff, is that he's sort of a man out of time now because the world is moving along. And in 1980, I mean, I think that's a pretty important time for that to happen. I mean, in a new decade, a lot of new things were going on. Technology was starting to build, and money was a bigger thing. And he's kind of an old school guy who's just stuck there. And really, throughout the film, he's sort of trailing behind everyone, and that's kind of how he is in life, which I think is just so interesting. And that makes me think, like, this is a kind of a rare three-hander where it's these three people, these three men, all kind of in their own way dealing with similar things, sort of being in a time where maybe they're not what they once were.
What's so great about that is Anton is very much with the times. His haircut looks ridiculous, but he's
Yeah,
the
now.
only one that's keeping up with the times. His denim attire, everything is. If you take him out of the Southwest, you take him out of Western, he fits right in. Everybody else looks like they're out of time.
Yeah, I read something with the costume designer where she talks about that. And these are subtle things you don't necessarily think about, but he's supposed to seem as if he's a person trying to fit in, but has no ability to fit in. So his denim is off. His boots are almost too fancy and they're weird looking. So it's like a person pretending to be of that place, but impossible to fit in.
I kind of took that as part of the neurodivergence.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's possible that that's part of what the filmmakers were thinking. But in terms of costume, yeah, she was trying to present someone who is trying to pass, but is just failing because they don't understand what it really means to be of that place.
He's dressed up like a drugstore cowboy, and he's going out to the real cowboys.
Right.
A couple things on that. First, he made me think it, because of that sort of not really fitting in the way he thinks he does, made me think of another film we did, The Killer, where Michael Fassbender has this kind of like camouflage of this German tourist, and he tries to smile like he could fit in, but he's clearly just like really missing the mark. So maybe that's a thing with killers, is like they're just so disconnected from everybody else that when they try to fit in and they think they are, they really aren't. But the other thing is that the Coen brothers found this book called Boys Town, which was a collection of photographs taken at a brothel near the Mexican border. And every time a John would come in and visit with one of the women there, the proprietor would take a photograph of them. And they found a guy in one of these books who is the basis for his outfit. This guy looked just like him. Yeah.
I just love the idea that people would go to a brothel and be like, yeah, sure, you can take my picture. Like, it's a
that
different
blew my
time.
mind.
Definitely
Yeah.
a different time.
Totally different time.
Yeah, that made no sense to me. But yeah, sure enough, I mean, he is based on, at least like attire-wise, a real person. So there's probably somebody, well, at least in 1980, walking around like that.
Talking about the three different characters dealing with things in certain ways. Do you pick up that the first when we see Llewellyn kill the antelope, the last thing he says is "hold still," and when Anton pulls over the family guy and takes his car, the last thing he says is "hold still." I love that they start their journeys like that, identically.
That continues throughout the whole movie. That's the idea of the characters mirroring each other without ever actually interacting, which they don't.
Yep.
The characters never interact. There's three separate stories, but the Coens did is add a few extra scenes of mirroring, which the book doesn't have, which I think is just incredibly effective. That it shows you these people in the same places, almost doing the same things, but completely apart from each other. I really love that part of it.
Wanting or fearing for the other.
Yeah.
The most noticeable one is the TV set when Anton sits in front of it, and then Ed Bell sits in front of it. But Brolin also sits in front of it before that. They don't show that reflection the same way. But all three of them are in that exact same spot at some point, but not at the same time. And that kind of continues throughout. They're never on screen together. But that repetition carries over Llewellyn buying a jacket on that path to Mexico, and then Anton getting a shirt from that kid at the end after he's in the car crash. By the way, the other kid is Caleb Landry Jones, who was in Get Out and quite a few other things after this. So a very young Caleb Landry Jones. But that repetition is just, it works. I don't know if it could work in a book, but it works so well visually.
Well, then there's, the whole theme, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but uncertain death. But we see the mass killing that Llewellyn stumbles upon, and then the mass killing that Anton stumbles upon. And those are like the biggest, and we don't even see those.
Right.
Both unseen, but you're right. That's another idea of mirroring. Yeah, good point.
Another is there's two different flavors of uncertain death. There's what Anton is bringing with his coin toss and just his logic, and then the uncertain death of these mass shootouts that we get to stumble off.
So I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I actually wanted to ask that too. I think the most controversial point about this movie is, one, the way that it ends, but two, the fact that we don't see Llewellyn's death. And I was curious to what you guys thought about that in terms of how it made you feel about the movie. Because there are some people that really have a bad reaction to us not getting to see it. I was curious what you thought.
I like it the way it is. I think, you're following him the whole time, and it sort of fits the way the Coens made the film, with things being seen and unseen. I mean, you come across a lot of death throughout the film that you don't actually see happen. So it sort of fits with the way the film works. I mean, it's a main character, but, it fits right into me.
For me, it's framed beautifully because you're reminded that Llewellyn's not the main character of the story, that Sheriff Bell is actually your narrator. He's the one walking you through this story. He's the one that has seen the story from the beginning to the end.
Right.
I agree with you completely. That's what I thought too. I think that it's a great example of a person who thinks they're the main character of their story, but they're not. And that's a perfect way to drive that home, in that he's just another person in a much larger thing, which he doesn't even comprehend. His little story is not important in the larger context of the thing that he stepped into. And it's a great way of showing that. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, that's interesting because Tommy Lee Jones has the least amount of screen time. And you spend so much time with these other two characters, but they're just inside of the container of his story, which I think is it's a lot of trickery by the Coen brothers, and I guess by Cormac McCarthy in the book. I know there's a lot more sort of interior dialogue from the sheriff in the book. I guess I'm the only one here who hasn't read it, but The way I understand it is that it's a lot of like monologuing and just sort of him thinking out loud. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. Just David, because you mentioned the antelope, I was thinking about that as I watched it, and I think that kind of sets us up for Llewellyn Moss, who he is as a character, because he almost kills the antelope. The antelope gets to run away. And because he's just left of center, he stumbles into something that's like this huge, he thinks he got the prize, but then he stumbles into like this horrible mishap in this shootout. And then he finds this money, which seems like he's won a prize. But then it leads to this whole story of him being, killed essentially. So I think it really establishes that he's always close to where he wants to be, but always misses it.
He's shooting with an Army issue sniper rifle up
Right.
there, and he misses, and then he stumbles into the shootout, finds the money, and he knows he's in over his head because when he brings Agua back, he says, "I'm doing something stupid." He knows he's not doing anything. Like,
Well, the fact that his whole story gets set off by an act of empathy.
yeah, but what he should, as a sniper or as a trained soldier, he should never tell his target to hold still. He should be the still one. That's the thing, is he's not still.
Right.
So they do a great little job of setting that up. That he's not the hero. He's not the hero type. He's just a regular guy in a desperate situation, trying to do the right thing in the right time.
Wow, that's a wonderful insight that I didn't even think about. That the fact that he misses that shot almost presents us from the get-go, showing that he's not necessarily the person that we want him to be.
Right. But he's so close, and he thinks he got it, and that's what happens with the money. He thinks he found this windfall, but and I guess that speaks to like fate and his fate and is it going to catch up to you? Is there any way to avoid it? Like that's kind of the thing with the flipping of the coin,
Well, he's hardly committed to any of his actions.
Right.
Neither is Anton. Anton is just trying to teach people about chance, essentially.
What a weird thing. I mean, he's a killer who just flips a coin. I mean, he's like Harvey Dent in Batman, right? Like it just, and what a great character. Just like the embodiment of the Grim Reaper, flipping a coin to determine whether you're going to die or not.
But great is a reason that Javier Bardem's the only one that won an Oscar for this. And it's true that character isn't really on the page. There's no description of him. He does a lot more talking, interestingly enough, in the book too, but he's very much an unknown character. Watching the way they brought him to life, it's really impressive. I mean, every time he's on the screen, it's just riveting. And the very opening sequence where he strangles the guy to death, the look on his face, it is so frightening. It is like a horror movie. It's so frightening.
Yeah.
That I was watching that opening scene, and it's such a horrific death with the strangulation. And you see him, he's not even focusing on what he's doing. It essentially looks like he's just trying to focus so he doesn't cramp. He is checked out. He's just going through a physical accident he's probably done a few times. It's all muscle memory. He is completely checked out, and he's not even reacting to what the deputy is doing.
Right. And Mike, you mentioned that he's such an unknown character, and he's almost mythological in the film to the people around him.
He's a shark in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a chatty shark at times. But he's essentially just a shark in the water. He's there. His actions and the fear of his actions are causing the others to make mistakes and half measures.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think he's just such an interesting character who kind of, because of his uniqueness, became sort of the legacy of the film, right? I mean, he's in the culture, which you don't see too often.
Yeah, good example of that. I'm watching the movie last night, and my son, who's never seen the movie, walks in, and he just stopped and he's like, "Is this No Country for Old Men?" And it was a scene with Anton, and he recognized it instantly. I mean, I've never seen the movie and not being like a huge movie buff, but he noticed instantly what it was. And so you're right. I think it's just in the culture in a way that not a lot of Coen Brothers characters even are.
It has to be the haircut, right? I mean, like, what else would you know him as if you didn't see the film? Like, maybe the cattle thing, but I don't know. He's just
that. By the way, that's from the book. I just think what an interesting idea.
That
I've
is
never.
something that I do too. I walk into Lowe's and I see a unique tool. I mean, like, what the hell is this thing for?
yeah.
And then you start thinking, like, what else could it be used for? And the way that Cormac implements it is just amazing, because you think about it, he's coming from the big city and he's taking this thing used to kill cattle and using it against cowboys. He's killing them with their own invention, and it's a new invention.
Mm-hmm. And that speaks to sort of how Sheriff Ed Tom Bell is like behind, because he explains that tool to Clara Jean and doesn't even connect that it's what he's using. So he's sort of always just a step behind, which I find
everyone is
interesting. Yeah,
he's killing cowboys with a new method, a more efficient method of killing cattle. It's the greatest metaphor in the show or movie or book, I guess.
And the way that it's used to open doors too. Like I said, just a classic horror movie things. Like, to me, that's exactly what that feels like. Using that thing to push the locks open is just a very, very nice horror movie-esque use of that. It makes it the impending doom.
Tom Lee calls this a horror movie.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's psychological horror. There's no denying that.
I think it's a horror movie in a lot of different ways. I mean, it's the horror of the elements. It's the horror of this ghoul chasing you. It's the horror of like aging out of society. I mean, I didn't really think about it that way, but this is a horror movie. Maybe we should have put it in a horror month. That's very interesting. Let's talk about the Coen brothers and how this fits in, because it's a little bit of a departure for them, but it's also very similar in a lot of ways. And are you guys big Coen Brothers fans?
I am not. I'm just inadvertently things that I found out that they made over the years. Of course, Barton Fink is what I think I watched that in early high school. And then I graduated, and I didn't get to see a lot of their films until later, because in the military, they actually have a panel that watches all films and decides what can be shown on our TV shows and in our movie theaters.
Wow.
There's no trailers, none of that stuff. You just basically stand at attention. They play the national anthem. The film starts. You sit down and you watch the film. But there's so many films. There were so many films like The Rock with Sean Connery, and anything that depicted Nicolas Cage, anything that depicted the military in a bad light or the government in a bad light, we couldn't watch. Anything like that.
That's interesting. I wonder if there are any Coen Brothers films that fall under that banner. I don't know.
It got so weird that I was in Iraq for a while, and we went with like 33 movies. And at one point, our chaplain walked in, and we were all watching The Little Mermaid.
Those are the movies that they show you? It
was just Iraq? I mean, we had safe movies to watch. Things that wouldn't upset or rile or stir the emotions. Things like that.
Wow. But not The Big Lebowski? That feels like that would be like a nice...
Yeah. I mean, we had our own films. That was back in the day of we had little portable DVD players. So much was missed. So I got to see Old Brother Wore Out There after the fact.
Okay.
But that's a movie that people don't even associate with the source material.
Right.
Which is Homer. But much like Old Country, it's a Greek tragedy.
Yeah, and another adaptation from the Coens, which they do pretty regularly. So
I'm sure you know I'm a big Coen Brothers fan. And in terms of, if you really step back and look at this, because there are a lot of people that say it's different from other things they've done. There are other people that call it like the culmination of their work, kind of like the thing they've been building towards. But I really do think if it fits really well with the things they've done before, because I think what they've always specialized in, and then we talked about this, the idea of taking film noir and putting it in a Western or even a horror movie, like these ideas of mixing story and putting it into a different setting almost.
It's very much hell or high water.
Right. But I think that in terms of their work, they do this a lot. I think that they take a certain story and they'll drop it into a different context. Brother or Art, that was a perfect example, taking the Odyssey and putting it in the Dust Bowl, or Big Lebowski, of course, taking a noir movie and dropping it in wherever the hell that is. But into some crazy situation. Even Fargo, it's like the idea of taking one type of movie but putting it into a foreign place. And I think that that's where this fits into what they've done before. I think they're very good at that. And this is one of the best examples, obviously. Maybe one of their best movies, but a perfect example of why that's effective.
Right. One thing you can see in Lebowski and No Country is that everyone is convinced they are the main character.
Yeah. Right. That's very true. Yeah, and this carries that humor over too, a little more subtly, but there's always that sort of nod that the Coen brothers fit in, and I think that's a big hallmark for them. The dog in particular, for me, the swimming dog is like so Coen brothers. It's like perfect.
Yeah, the scene with Anton where he asks the person who runs the trailer park where Llewellyn works, I think is a perfect example of the kind of comedy that only they can pull off. It's just such a weird scene, and you keep waiting for something to happen, but it doesn't. And she's so self-assured about telling him to go screw off. I think that kind of element is something that really tags their work and what they do.
I think any scene where Anton is interacting with someone like that has that to it. I mean, there's the gas station attendant, there's the man on the side of the road with the chicken truck. Every interaction feels like it's almost a comedy in a way with him, and I'm not sure what that says about him, or maybe that's like his inability to interact like a normal human or something.
Well, there's potential for comedy with anyone depending on how they responded to him. Right. Most of the men were shuddering, but the women were always brazen against him.
Yeah,
that's true.
The wife would not play; she would not pick heads or tails, which was why she died, because that was his automatic rule. If you didn't play, you died.
Yeah, I think that's a nice choice. One of the few differences in the book as well. One of the few changes they made. In the book, she just kind of agrees to play the game, and it plays out exactly as you think it would. But in the movie, he refuses, and I think that is a great little twist that fits in with your idea of the women actually rejecting him outright, but also showing her strength of character. And I really appreciated that little change.
That points to the question of can you shake your fate or change it too? Because if she wasn't going to play, she was going to die anyway. So, if she had played, would she have won? Would she have lost? We don't know, but she got that fate in the end.
But they were robbing him of his one pleasure in life.
Yeah.
Just getting to toy with people.
And he does it so well. Oh my God. One of my favorite characters I think we've discussed after nearly 70 episodes on this show. He's just so fun in his darkness and his comedy. It's really great.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this actually, I think 3 times this week for preparing for this. And I do think the gas station scene, it's almost impossible to quantify what makes it so great. But it really is one of my favorite scenes, I think, in any movie I've watched. And again, the silence helps. Like, you're not being told what to think about it, so you're not sure where it's going to go. You're given no context and no clues, and you have no idea what's going to happen in that moment because you don't even know the coin toss yet. So you really are unsure in every moment about how it plays out. And the fact that they changed the setting from the nighttime to the middle of the day. So him saying, I have to close, or, I'm going to get ready to close.
Yeah.
In the book, it's later, so it makes it seem like he is closing. In this, though, you know that he's doing it out of fear. So another subtle choice that changes everything. But everything about that scene is perfect, in my opinion, because you really have no idea where you stand.
Right. I think a big part of that scene for me, and this speaks to Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, is that peanut wrapper just sort of like decompressing and like spreading out. I mean, that almost like paces the scene. And I mean, that creates tension in my mind. Is like you just see this thing, it's slow and it's going, and just one of many brilliant things that is. I mean, I don't know if
A
Deakins made that
great
choice.
choice. They could have gone with the slow, dramatic coin spinning like we've seen a million times.
Right.
But we get this crinkling wrapper.
Yeah.
Right. We always talk about how in the hands of other filmmakers, things can be heavy-handed. And you're right. The coin would have played a lot more in where it's just kind of in the background of the scene almost as well. It's not even as much about the coin as it is about the two of them looking at each other. Or the music would have cued you into something, and they gave you none of that.
Yeah. And the lack of music is so fascinating to me. I mean, it's so perfect for it. And we talked about Bone Tomahawk earlier this month, which also had very little music in it. And I think in the setting, it just creates such a like you have to sit in that, and you're almost worried, like you're just waiting for something to happen.
You don't realize how much you rely on music cues until they're not there.
Yeah.
That you expect them, even going back to silent film. I mean, all of this, you know what's coming based on the music you're hearing, and once it's gone, you feel adrift. And there's so much internal tension you don't even realize because you're nervous because you don't know what's going to happen anymore.
With that in mind, you can watch Don't Breathe, and it's very, very similar.
Yeah, yeah. I think it also changes the way the cinematographer shoots a scene, because if he's not relying on that music to cue the audience into what's coming, he has to shoot that differently to fill that space and to build that tension in a visual way. Whereas you know, thanks to Max Steiner, we have the musical scores and the cues that will make you know what's coming. But he does it, like in particular when Llewellyn is sitting in the hotel and you see under the doorway, you know, like that is such a tense moment, even without the music, but that had to be shot that way because there's no music. In any other movie, you would hear that swelling of music to build that anticipation of someone being outside.
Right.
But the way Deakins had to do it was like in a different way. And I just think that's so, I mean, I'm a very visual guy, so I've listened to like 10 interviews this week with Roger Deakins because I mean, the guy's like the GOAT to me. And just hearing him talk about how he had to do this in such a different way of everything else because of that is just fascinating. And you know, Deakins didn't win an Oscar for this, but a lot of people did. So we're going to have to talk about the Oscars at some point too. Quite a controversial year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I knew we were gonna get to that and wanted to talk about it because the movie it was up against. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but well, so David, I like worship at the altar of Paul Thomas Anderson. I just love him so much, and so this is a very disappointing year for me. But
be the first year I'll pay attention because I was writing this year,
right?
Just watching, seeing who's doing what and what work and what kind of work is being, and of course trying to get Coydog made.
Yeah.
But now having been in the writer's room and met the actors and seen how this stuff gets presented to Hollywood for the awards is amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and it's like month-long campaigns and so much money.
Because I'm in the Writers Guild, I get the emails and I get the for-your consideration emails every day.
Yeah,
it's starting already.
Even now, for this year. Wow. They really start early. That must be so much money to put into these things. It makes sense that they would really push, I guess. But yeah, so No Country for Old Men was up against There Will Be Blood in particular, but this speaks
another
to
adaptation.
Exactly. Yeah. Kind of a free adaptation from Upton Sinclair. It started that way and sort of morphed into Paul Thomas Anderson's own thing, but it definitely has those bones of oil in it.
So did you stumble onto this info, by the way? I only found this out when I was doing research for this, that both There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men were both filmed in Marfa, Texas at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That they were basically next to each other at one point of the filming, but they were also distributed by the same companies too. Miramax and Paramount Classic bankrolled them both.
Yeah.
I didn't realize those parallels until I was looking this up. That's really interesting to me.
Well, there was a day where No Country was shooting and they had to stop because PTA was testing the explosion of the oil derrick in the distance and it was showing up in their shots. So they had to shut down for a day because of that, which I think is great. And I also heard this story from Bill Hader. I don't know if this is true or not, but he had authority from somebody working on No Country for Old Men. In the scene where Anton is in the car crash at the end, they blocked off the streets but didn't do a very good job of it. And somebody sped through the shot on a 10 speed and said, "Get the hell out of my way." And the legend is that it's Daniel Day-Lewis because he was so close shooting There Will Be Blood. So he was out riding his bike and just rode through a scene for the Coen Brothers movie. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a pretty great legend. I guess that's the peril of filming so close together, these big open spaces. But yeah, so there was There Will Be Blood that year. But there were also a few other Westerns, which I think is pretty interesting because it's almost like out of nothing. Like, I don't know what trend there was that led to five Westerns being made this year.
But 310 to Yuma, which we talked about last week.
Yeah. So. And also the assassination of the Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
My Heart, My Wounded Knee.
Yeah.
The other one that came out in 2007.
Oh, right. That was an HBO thing. Right.
So I don't know what was in the water that year, but it was a good year for Westerns. And There Will Be Blood and No Country really got the only Oscar love.
But also nominated that year is another movie we did for the pod, Michael Clayton, which is one of our favorites. Yep. So, I always end up grappling with this where, not like it, I don't get too worked up about who wins the Oscar, although we did do a separate podcast about all of this, where we didn't get to this year. But it feels like Fargo was the movie they probably should have won for, and No Country for Old Men almost makes up for them losing it for Fargo. But is No Country a better movie than Michael Clayton or There Will Be Blood? I don't know. I don't have a problem with either one of them winning, and we could definitely argue it all different ways. But I'm not positive.
Well, rewatching this, I can see why it won. I mean, I held a grudge against it for years because it wasn't There Will Be Blood, but seeing it again with a little bit of perspective, it's an incredible film, and it could have gone either way. So I'm not as mad at it for winning anymore.
It isn't my hang up with that film, and there's such a huge juxtaposition in this movie too with Anton and all the other characters, but Paul Dano and Daniel Day-Lewis didn't seem like they belonged in the same planet. They just, and it's not a jab to Paul Dano. He looks like, someone of that era, but just putting him next to someone who's just so hardened and grizzled, those characters are just such juxtapositions of each other. It's like, how do you exist, and how does Paul Dano's character even navigate?
He wasn't even supposed to be in that role. He plays twins as the Sunday brothers, and Eli is that character. But there was another actor who was Eli, and he dropped out because he couldn't handle Daniel Day-Lewis yelling at him. Like during the scenes, it was so intense that he couldn't do the part. So then they just made Dano twins.
Yeah. But he just seems whipped in that role, which I understand.
Yeah. How do you go up against Daniel Day-Lewis? I mean, that's a losing proposition no matter how you go about it. But Daniel Day-Lewis did, of course, win. Tommy Lee Jones nominated as the leading actor, which I guess makes sense in the context that we talked about, even though he has the least amount of screen time, as we said.
I'm wondering what y'all think about that, because he is from the area where they filmed that.
I was reading about that.
Is he playing himself in this?
Yeah, the fact that he was from West Texas and everyone else on set was like, he never failed to remind anyone that he was from West Texas.
Yeah.
Then it became almost a joke that he just kept correcting people about how to be from West Texas. So
the only person he gave props to was Mrs. Moss.
Yeah, Kelly MacDonald of all people. He said that she was great. So go figure.
I read that he, in Josh Brolin's memoir, he talks about shooting this, and he met Tommy Lee at a bar. They don't have any scenes together, of course. So he met him and he was just like sizing him up, and he had no like confidence that he could play somebody from West Texas because he was from West Texas and he knew how it should go. But Josh Brolin, not a chance. So
From what I remember, Josh Brolin's, he was filming with Quentin Tarantino.
yeah.
And he actually filmed, Tarantino filmed his audition, and they sent it to him.
Yeah.
And the Coens was like, this guy's okay, but who lit this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he and Robert Rodriguez, so that because they were filming Grindhouse.
Oh, yeah, that's I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what it was.
But it was,
Rodriguez. I'm sorry.
No, it was Rodriguez and Tarantino. They both worked on it, and I
Right,
saw it.
Yeah, the angles on this are amazing. Like,
I saw it on the supplemental materials of the Criterion edition, and it looks beautiful. I mean, it's so tight, and the lighting.
I haven't seen it.
It's pretty amazing. So I get it. I get why that is. But so Josh Brolin has been in 3 films with Tommy Lee Jones, but he's never shared the screen with him. But he actually played him in Men in Black, one of the Men in Black films. I heard an interview with him where somebody brought that up. They said, you worked with Tommy Lee Jones in 3 films, but you were never on screen with him. And he said, that's God looking out for me. Because I guess he's just tough to work with.
Yeah, by all accounts. I mean, you know the stories on Batman Forever, where like supposedly made Jim Carrey cry. Like, it was not great. So he's definitely difficult to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a tough dude. I mean, he's West Texas,
he's from
right?
West Texas. That's
Yeah. But think about what was the comedy he played where he was protecting a group of cheerleaders.
Oh yeah, it was like Man of the House or Bringing Down the House or something.
It was essentially the same character. He was a West Texas sheriff, and he was.
Yeah. I realized, did Tommy Lee Jones perfect the Jason Statham comedy, where you basically just play the same part in a comedy and it makes it funny?
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't matter what uniform you put him in. He's playing the West Texas sheriff, and he's going to be that guy. Got him an Oscar nomination for this. Just to shout out, well, Javier Bardem won Best Supporting Actor for this. And again, for me, I take it as a personal affront because Philip Seymour Hoffman didn't win for Charlie Wilson's War. But we'll leave that alone. Roger Deakins, kind of the Jane Seymour of Oscars. He was nominated something like 20 times. Did not win for this. Robert Elswit won for There Will Be Blood. But when I look at those two, man, Deakins, the way this film looks, some of the choices that are made, it's just the superior looking film to me to There Will Be Blood.
I agree with you. I think that when you think about There Will Be Blood, you actually just think about Daniel Day-Lewis, that's an actor showcase movie. Whereas this movie is a filmmaker showcase movie.
Yep.
So I agree with you. I don't necessarily think that that's the award it should have won for.
It pains me to say it, but Deakins should have been winning this Oscar. Didn't win until 2018 for Blade Runner 2049, which is crazy.
It's like you did not give him that award for Blade Runner 2049. As decent as that movie looked, that is not why he won that Oscar. That's the Al Pacino special.
Yeah.
I have one crazy note that I stumbled across that I just have to share. There's a scene in the movie where the sheriff discusses the murdering of a federal judge as one of the things about the country falling apart. And so he must have been referencing a murder that actually happened in San Antonio in 1979. The thing that makes it crazy is the person that murdered that federal judge was Charlie Harrelson, Woody Harrelson's father.
Yeah.
And Woody Harrelson's actually in this movie, but that's who murdered that judge. That was crazy.
As a hitman,
right?
Yeah, that is, I forgot about that. That's right. Wow, that's crazy that Woody Harrelson's dad was an assassin.
Really is.
Yeah, man. So I guess it's easy for him to play this role. You don't really see any of that. But
I don't know. Oh, and we have to mention another great Stephen Root cameo performance that we just find that he pops up in everything. He's one of those guys. It's always great.
And while we're at it, Beth Grant, who plays Clara Jean's mom, also played Dennis Quaid's mom in The Rookie.
That's right.
A few months back. Love her. So lot of good talent in this, even in the minor roles.
Yeah, the way she says, and speaking of comedy, the way she says "I have the cancer" is just. I didn't even catch it till the second time I watched it. That when he's on the phone with his wife, and he says she'll be fine, and then in the background she yells out, "I have the cancer." Like, I even hear that the first time. It's one of those really funny parts that just dropped in.
She's pure comedy in this. I mean, when the guy comes up to her to get the information, she's like, "Oh, I don't see many wearing suits all the time,"
Right.
and she's such a character. I love her so much. I don't have much else to say about this. I don't know if you guys do. I'm happy to move on just to kind of say, David, we like to talk about what the film did financially. And this did pretty well, actually. Had a $25 million budget and it grossed $172 million. So I think the Best Picture win probably helped. So
yeah, again, we talked about this before. This is, again, one of the last times, not one of the last, that a movie did well financially and also won the Oscar, where you have this convergence of people wanting to see it and it also doing well in terms of Oscar win.
And it's pretty beloved. Rotten Tomatoes has it with a critics rating of 93 and an audience rating of 86, which is probably one of the highest I've seen. That's really there's no downside.
This is
to
a
it.
movie that is tailor made for film nerds. I mean, come on.
True.
So Letterboxd is going to be off the charts. This is a movie.
Letterboxd.
It's
a
film nerds just
4.3.
freak out over. This is what we're made for. So sure.
4.3 on Letterboxd. The highest rating I've seen on there.
We get to talk about the nuances all the time. This is our kind of movie. So,
yep, this is the one. All right, well then we'll wrap it up. I mean, this is there's not much else to say about it. I hope everybody watches this. There's a beautiful Criterion edition 4K that just came out a few months ago. I highly recommend that. Or I'm sure it's streaming. Oh, it's on MGM Plus.
That means it's not streaming. Nope.
Hard to believe. Hard to believe any Best Picture film would not be streaming. I know it's on the Criterion channel every once in a while, but maybe it's not there now. But yeah, that's No Country for Old Men. And David, we usually like to talk about things we watched this week or the last great thing we saw. So have you seen anything recently that you want to mention?
I have not. As in my bio, it says that I have an ever-growing garden and food forest. Yeah. So right now I'm like every day from sun up to I basically pass out, I'm working on my gardens. I just built a 16 by 7 foot wide by 6 foot high grape trellis yesterday.
Wow.
I have a half-acre garden. So that's what I've been working on. I haven't really seen anything. I did get burned out when I was in the writer's room and we wrapped up this spring. So I haven't been watching too much. I've watched some dailies and things like that. But, the show's over, but I'm still watching that and kind of absorbing the whole process.
So before we seem sad in comparison, sitting watching movies while you're building a garden, what exactly are you growing in that garden? I'm curious to know.
Okay. I have an orchard with over 40 fruit trees. I think I have 26 different kinds of fruit.
Wow, you're planting fruit trees. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the fruit trees, but I have edibles. I have medicinals, lemon balm, teas. I'm building a greenhouse next week that I can get because I'm in Oklahoma and there's stuff that's tropical that I want to grow that I can't here. I've got a bunch of different medicinals that I'm growing. I have a 700-gallon round trough that I'm growing wine cap and shiitake mushrooms in. I've baked everything. I'm harvesting radishes this week. I've got spinach that I took in last week. Last year, I harvested 90 pounds of sweet potatoes, and now I have 3 different varieties instead of 1. So I eventually, I've got pretty much everything. I've got a huge salsa bed with like 5 different kinds of peppers, 3 different kinds of tomatoes, and I've got Italian and Greek oregano.
You need to be careful. Steven's gonna move out there and stay with you.
Salsa bed is the greatest phrase I've ever heard. I really love that so much. Is it easy to grow things in Oklahoma from the soil?
It is. Well, I have a huge problem with groundhogs here, but I live on 50-year-old pasture, so my trees just took off.
Oh,
but
cool.
I've done some terraforming. I've built swells, which are meant to slow the water on the property and absorb it. So my trees are just loving that.
See, because we only watch movies, I thought that groundhogs only lived in one place in Pennsylvania. I had no idea they were so prevalent in Oklahoma.
I thought they only lived in Bushwood Country Club.
Right. Yeah, those are the only two places.
Mike, did you watch anything this week that you want to mention?
Of course I watched something. Now I feel bad talking about it, but because I wasn't outside enough. I was watching movies, but not that many. So actually what I ended up watching, I told you I watched Novocaine, which I thought was pretty good.
Mhm.
And it was a little different than I expected it to be. But I tried to watch Havoc this week. That movie on Netflix that's directed by Gareth Evans, the guy that directed The Raid.
Yeah.
After about 45 minutes, I realized this is really dull and I don't care about any of these people. And so I actually stopped watching it. I really thought I would like it because I really love The Raid. And there was nothing really interesting in this, even though it had some pretty good actors. Tom Hardy, Tim Oliphant, Forrest Whitaker. But I got pretty bored. So then I switched to Love Hurts, which
from bad to worse.
Was also terrible, but only better because it was so much shorter. It was only like an hour and 20 minutes. And that's the only reason it was better. So yeah, watched two bad action movies, which only made me appreciate Novocaine in hindsight more. But I couldn't recommend any of those. But yeah, I'm not sure any of those movies are things I would recommend.
Love Hurts did have Marshawn Lynch in it, which is always a plus.
It did.
Yeah.
Even Marshawn Lynch couldn't save it, which is sad.
I only watched one thing this week. I watched a film called Bring Her Back, which is from the Filippo brothers. They're this Australian set of twins who kind of came to fame through a YouTube channel where they make these short horror films that are just like high quality. And they got a deal and they made a film called Talk to Me 2 years ago for A24. And this is the follow up to that. It was pretty good. It has Sally Hawkins, who I know from Paddington and Happy Go Lucky, as this like Satan worshiping mom who is trying to bring her dead daughter back by keeping her soul in the body of this little boy. It's very bizarre to see her in that role, but they have a great quality to their filmmaking, very visceral, very kind of upsetting, but very stylized. So I think it comes out this week. I would recommend going to see it if you like horror films. It's kind of unique and pretty fun. So yeah, I would say check it out. That's the only thing I watched. And I think that's it. Next week, we're going to talk about Go from 1999. We're going to start a new month where we're doing One Crazy Night films. Everything happens in one night, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. We have some good stuff coming up. Until then, David, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find you?
I am only on Instagram. I don't have my website anymore. You can find me on there, just David Tromblay. There's no one else by that name. Got Coydog coming out Veterans Day, and The Lowdown comes out on FX September. That stars Ethan Hawke, Tim Blake Nelson, Killer Mike, Keith David, Peter Dinklage.
Wow.
There's a few Oklahoma names you're going to recognize. There's a few people from Twin Peaks in the show. You check out their IMDb. The cast is amazing.
I can't wait.
Drama. It's a crime story, but just like this, you've got a crime, a family saga, and a whodunit.
Awesome. I can't wait for that. I don't watch a lot of TV shows, but you're really selling me on this. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Myself, Lou Burney, and Walter Mosley were the crime authors in the room.
Very cool.
So it's going to have a different flavor than most of you.
That's exciting.
Yeah, can't wait. And people can buy Coydog on Amazon or wherever.
Yes, Amazon everywhere. You can buy it at bookshop.org. If you don't want to mess with Amazon, I won't scold anyone who uses it. But yes, bookshop.org is a good place to go. And you can go to desancbooks.org, which is DDANC books.org. It's available everywhere.
Awesome.
Thanks.
And it's really good. Everybody should go get it. All right. Well, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week with Go. So long. As always, thanks for listening to the Weekly Movie Throwdown. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode, so be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And for even more from us, visit moviethrowdownpod.com or connect with us on social media. We're Movie Throwdown on Letterboxd and at Movie Throwdown Pod everywhere else.